Hello, I'm Ray Bradshaw and this is a Scottish Football Podcast. All the news, views and analysis you need on Monday the 20th of October. And Celtic are stunned at Dens Park.
Cross into the near post, it's 2-0! It's gone in! Wesley celebrates! He got a touch, it might have taken a deflection as well, but it's ended up in the back of the Celtic net!
What's going wrong at the Champions? Hearts, meanwhile, keep on strolling at the top of the league.
Chance for Braga and the goalkeeper and Kelly again, the architects of their own downfall, and it's a double for Claudio Braga. Hearts will stay top. Kilmarnock 0, Hearts 3.
A comfortable win at Kilmarnock keeps them 5 points clear, whilst managerless Rangers stumble to yet another draw.
People will ask me, did I enjoy today? I won't, because I know what the expectations are every time you play here. It's to win the game, and that was the message to the players, and I'm just disappointed I didn't do that today.
We'll guide you through another very quiet weekend in the Scottish Premiership.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
Yes, hello and welcome to the start of your week. We've got another jam-packed episode of the Scottish Football Podcast today. Myself, Ray Bradshaw. We've got two brilliant guests. First up, we've got Ryan McGowan, Australian and Livingston defender. I nearly upgraded you to Liverpool there, Ryan.
I was going to say, I'd be delighted for that one. You've heard something I've not.
Yeah, the rumours are about. I saw you've been a bit tough time with injury. How are you feeling just now, Ryan? Everything good?
Yeah, good. Obviously, had a bit of a tough time with it. Sort of picked up a quite severe infection, so I was in hospital for probably 3.5 weeks or so. So need a little operation, a bit of a sort of tidy up of the infection. But yeah, feeling much better now and hopefully back sooner rather than later.
And in that 3.5 weeks, were you able to watch football or were you completely out of it? What were you doing? Were you away from the game?
First week I was probably out of it. Just with, it kind of caught me off guard. So first week or so I was a little bit out of it, but then was able to sort of, my weekends were the best in obviously being in hospital, being able to watch the football and see all the scores coming in. So definitely a lot more interesting watching it and seeing all the scores coming live instead of, obviously playing and then coming in after the games and checking it. So it was quite a roller coaster, seeing all the scores coming in live. It's something that I'm not usually used to.
Yeah, it's good to see you doing better as well. We're also joined by Michael Grant, the Times Scottish football correspondent. Michael, first things first, are you jealous of Ryan having 3.5 weeks off? Journalists don't even get that time off, do they?
No, they don't, Ray. We don't get the sympathy either, of course. And what I would say is that covering the Rangers managerial story over the last 3.5 weeks, hospital sounds like the better option, frankly.
We'll get on to that soon because I think in 25 minutes it's my turn to be linked with them. But let's kick off with the game at Dens Park yesterday where Stephen Presley's side absolutely stunned Celtic with a 2-0 win. Their first win against Celtic since the late 80s at Dens Park. Michael, Celtic looked completely out of sorts at Dens, didn't they?
They really did, Ray, and I'm sure we'll talk about the title race and Hearts later in the show, but I don't think, however Hearts' season was going to start, nobody would have anticipated Celtic looking so vulnerable and weak and flat. Alarmingly so if you're a Celtic supporter. It's pretty obvious that they just don't carry anything like the goal threat and the fear and menace that Celtic teams have always had. You always felt that you could be hurt by Celtic in an attacking sense as an opposing team or fan, And I don't think that is there at the moment. I think that was the 6th game this season without scoring for Celtic. There's 3 or 4 teams have scored more than them in the division. And then, of course, Brendan Rodgers comes out after the game and, that quote about you can't give me a Honda Civic and expect me to drive it like a Ferrari. It was like, wow. I mean, that is some quote in terms of what it says about the dressing room that he feels he's got at the moment, And I'm not sure if you were a player in that dressing room what you would think about that remark, to be honest with you, But
let's ask Ryan, what would you think about that if your manager came out and said something like that?
I do think it's a bit tongue-in-cheek considering all the sort of financial gap that they have, to say that about them when basically they come to a car race and, the rest of us in the league are on a scooter. So, it is a little bit, I think as a player, he probably said worse in the changing rooms in terms of, the standards that they have to meet. He probably had to try and think of something else to say to the media. A lot of the times when a manager comes out and slaughters the players as such, he's probably just done it in the changing room and probably 100 times worse. So the only time it kind of causes massive rifts is if he said one thing inside the changing room and then he goes out and says a completely different thing. So I sort of sensed that he was very angry, obviously with the performance and the result. And I think there's just a sort of storm cloud over Celtic, I guess, in terms of how they are at the moment, between the fans, between the club, between the players, everything. And I think it's just sort of a bit of built up anger that he probably let loose to the players, and so he should. If you are a Celtic player, the results or the start of the season that they've had, albeit it's a lot better than the other side of the city, but I think there'd be a lot more pressure if it was Rangers 5 points clear going into next week. So he's probably been a little bit let off in terms of that aspect, but he's just obviously really frustrated at the way they're going. And like what we probably said, we'll touch on, he's now left with those players until January. There's a lot of games between now in January to turn that Honda Civic into a Ferrari.
Yeah, because I think the BBC sport website had a stat that since that Bayern Munich game back in February, Celtic have won 15 out of the last 28, so 55% win ratio. We'll get on to Dundee and their defending in a bit because lack of possession, but I watched the game, I thought they were brilliant. Before we chat about Celtic, the team, Michael, Brendan Rodgers linked with Nottingham Forest. It does feel like we're coming to a kind of end game with him at Celtic, do you feel?
It does. I mean, I must admit, I always thought he would see out the 3 seasons. I didn't think there was any prospect of that being a decision that would be taken away from his hands. You're now beginning to wonder about that because it does look such a uncomfortable marriage now between Rodgers and the board. And there's tensions there. Obviously, the supporters, I think, are siding with Rodgers up to a point. I think you saw the banners today again, the faces with the lines through it of Lawwell, Nicholson and Chris Mackay. You saw the tennis ball protests. But you also saw after the game, you saw a lot of online comment from the Celtic supporters saying, this is on Rodgers too. I mean, Ryan's point there is bang on about, and not being dismissive, but there is an enormous gap between what Celtic are bringing to the party in terms of resources and what most of the rest of the teams, nearly all of the rest of the teams. So he's not been asked to drive a Ferrari. He's been asked to beat Dundee at Dens Park. Now, Dundee were excellent. I totally agree with you, Ray. But you're not being asked to beat PSG here. And Celtic's resources. Listen, of course, you can always lose a game of football, but the way they lost it, even though the stats were quite good, or the stats kind of indicated that they should have got more out of the game, but you could see with your own eyes that they were flat and they weren't at it, and they weren't a shadow of the kind of quality levels that we're used to seeing from Celtic.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you just said, Michael. I do find it funny that the fans do a 5-minute protest and then Dundee score in the added time of the first half due to that protest. Always enjoy that kind of stuff when it happens to Rangers and Celtic. Ryan, how does a winning machine become so disjointed? They look blunt up front, there's errors in defence. How does that happen so quickly?
Yeah, a lot of it's probably down to confidence, I think. I think fans come to watch games and they expect everyone to be at a certain level or remember players from certain games, and that kind of sticks out as to why he's not playing at that level. But, every game brings its own challenges. Sometimes you could be feeling on top of the world. First 5 minutes you have a bad touch, or, the winger you're up against goes straight past you and all of a sudden you're a bit like, oh, wow. And you start going back into your shell a little bit. When results aren't going well or how they should be, that tends to happen a lot quicker. You tend to try and take the safer option. You tend to not almost play with a bit of free spirit. And I think when Celtic are at their best, it looks like it's a well-oiled machine, but a lot of it is, I don't want to say off the cuff because it's disrespectful, but it's one touch, it's in and around the box, it gets pinged out, set wide, crosses in, everyone's moving, everyone knows where they're going. Whereas just now it feels that, players are maybe taking that extra touch, that they're worried they might lose possession. And like what Michael said, all the stats indicated that they dominated. I think at one point it was up to 96% possession. But I felt like the Dundee players were pretty happy with where they were having the ball. I think some of Celtic's best chances in the second half was deep crosses. And Dundee were well prepared. They had sort of their back five almost covering the 6-yard box. If a Celtic player wasn't to get enough connection, there was always a Dundee player there to sort of be touch tight to him and put him off. And I just think back to the Celtic teams that I've played against over the years, and it's almost night and day, I guess, in terms of how they play. But put it down to, I'm sure Rogers will put it down to a really bad day at the office. But I think a lot of Celtic fans are probably more concerned that they've probably seen this kind of game coming for a few weeks, a few performances, that they don't see it maybe as a shock as someone that doesn't watch them every single week.
Yep, I think we're going to have a lot of Dundee fans and Hearts fans screaming at their listening device just now that we're not praising them or talking about the guys that are 5 points clear. Michael, finally, before we move on to the league leaders in Edinburgh, Dundee, a masterclass in defending, bouncing back from getting absolutely pummeled by Aberdeen before the international break. Really, really good day for them, wasn't it?
It was. And I think from memory they were close to beating Celtic at Dens Park last season, weren't they? And they gave up a stoppage time penalty and finished 3 each of a brilliant game. And that stat came out then about that had been 1988 since they'd last beaten Celtic at Dens, I mean, to be fair to them, they're not always in the Premier League, so it's not like they're playing, it's not that number of years multiplied by 2, but a fantastic day for the Dundee supporters. Their team deserved it. As Ryan said, they didn't have an awful lot of possession, but that was the game plan. It was to kind of absorb pressure and to hit counter-attack and to do that with real kind of aggression and purpose and speed, and it worked a treat. And I'm pleased for Stephen Presley because he's had a pretty tough time, right from the stuff he said at the beginning, which kind of put him a bit up against the wall sort of thing. And even the other day was saying, I can't say I'm really enjoying the job too much because it's been such a struggle, Well, I'm pretty sure he was enjoying it this morning.
Yeah, 100%. And a great result for them. League leaders Hearts, meanwhile, look confident and impressive as they dispatch Killie 3-0 in Ayrshire. Ryan, Euro Club, a lot of people thought this might be closer, but Hearts pretty much dominant. They go into the match against Celtic next week 5 points clear, one of their biggest games in years. Just as a former Jambo yourself, just sum it up. How good are they just now? And are they in pole position to win this league?
I think that's
nice easy question for you, mate. Come on.
Straight off the bat. I think a lot of Hearts fans are feeling very confident. I think if you ask them deep down, they would think it's still a long stretch to win the league. And I think everyone that knows it. But I think what fans love and what every season they hope for is to have this, what the Hearts fans are feeling just now.
Yeah.
That sense of feeling like the club's gone in the right direction, feeling, can't wait for the next game. I think that's what every football fan wants from their club. Dundee fans would be going home tonight so proud of their team, can't wait for next weekend, can't wait to go down and watch wherever they're playing. And I think Hearts fans have really got that at the moment. They're enjoying the style of play. They're enjoying that there's the players that they've been brought in who are previously unknowns to a lot of them are really good and have started really well. Have taken to the league. They're fully confident behind the manager. They like the manager. That they know that McInnes has a wonderful track record of being able to put kind of runs together that Hearts, when they signed him, were hoping to do. Like what he'd done with Aberdeen and like what he's done so far this season. But I think if they win next week and that goes to 8 points, it will be really interesting to see how Celtic and Rangers adapt to it. Because, a lot of the time they're used to pressure of being their first and second and challenging, but there seems to be a bit of a different feel to Hearts this season, and confidence is a huge thing in football. And when you watch Hearts at the moment, I think it was even Braga's second goal. To be coming into to the goalie, and it's almost like 5-a-side, 6-a-side stuff to do sort of the quick touch. 4,000 Hearts fans there, 3-0 up in a notoriously difficult place to a Kilmarnock who hadn't lost in 9 games. That was a really, really good performance. Kilmarnock fans will be thinking, yes, we gave them, a few goals, and I don't think they're great, but I think when you're on that roll and you're full of confidence, a lot of things start breaking for you, and that's what the season so far kind of feels like it for Hearts.
Yeah, it's so exciting. Like, because I was born in 1988, so I can't really remember a time when Rangers and Celtic haven't won the league. So this is, for a neutral like myself, a Thistle fan, this is exactly what you want. Michael, do you think Hearts have got the squad depth to keep this going?
Well, I think they've got quite a deep squad. It'll be really interesting to see what they do in January. If they do win the weekend and go 8 points clear, that suggests to me that they're still going to be around the hunt at New Year at least, and that's assuming that Celtic suddenly get their act in order, which isn't looking great. And of course, if Celtic lose at the weekend, there'll be another pile of pressure will come down onto them. Ray, I was in this situation a year ago as an Aberdeen fan, and everything that Ryan said there is spot on. It's magic, and you said it's magic. It just feels like everything that your team does clicks and comes off and works, and new signings work, and you get a little rub of the green here and there, and you get last minute winners and stuff like that. And you kind of pinch yourself and think, how long is this going to last? Now, Aberdeen's obviously spectacularly went off the rails. Hearts have dropped 2 points out of 8 games. Aberdeen dropped 2 in their first 11 last season. So they went deep into November.
Longer,
yeah, before they lost. And I actually think that McInnes is a canny enough manager to study Aberdeen last season and just think what went wrong there. What did they do that suggested they couldn't handle the pressure or whatever it may have been. But yeah, if you're a Hearts fan at the moment, it's magical and helped by the fact Celtic are 5 points worse off than they were this time last season. So Celtic are not as strong as they were a year ago, and that helps you. But that's it. And it's, listen, we all see it with teams, and we've all suffered it when our own teams can't get a win and everything goes wrong. But sometimes it works the other way, and that's the way it is for Hearts at the moment. And that's to their credit. That's not any kind of combination of lucky factors that have brought them to that. They're a well managed team. They've got good players, in some cases really, really exceptional looking players. And just at the moment, the chemistry works, the whole unit works.
Yeah, and
I think the other thing, sorry, just jump in there, is also the investment from Bloom and the analytics that have instantly worked with not all of the players, but players have come in from nowhere. Like I said, Braga, the winger, there's a few, I can't remember his name, Kizaridis, has come in and have instantly, been some of the best players in the league. Not only just at Hearts, in the league. I think Braga's already scored 5 or 6 goals in the league. For those players to come in and hit the ground running in pretty much the first window since Bloom's sort of invested, like you said, I think if they can get to January and still be in a position where they're within touching distance of Celtic's maybe not got their act together, I think they'll be thinking, we bring in another 4 or 5 Bragas, another players to fill in different positions. They're just fully behind the whole sort of run at the moment, and that's where a lot of the positivity is coming from.
Sorry, Ray, I was just going to say, I think what you'll see if they keep winning, and if they keep picking up a lot of points, you will see the narrative begin to change from the excitement of all this and the freshness of it to the kind of pressure and the expectation and just, can they do this? And, that'll build and build and build, and that'll be a real big psychological problem or test or challenge for the players and for the management to handle. We're going to see that. There's no question about it. You saw it with Leicester in England when they won it, and they handled it, and they came through it, and they kept churning out 1-0 wins. But at the moment, it's just fun for Hearts and around Hearts. It's just a great story.
Yeah, and I think I speak for all of us, Ryan, when we hope that Jamestown Analytics comes up and says to strengthen the squad, they need an ageing Australian defender, and let's see what happens. Be great to see them sign Tony Vidmar. Finally, Rangers struggled again on Saturday as they had yet another draw against Dundee United at Ibrox. But let's be honest, with everything at Ibrox, this isn't the main story that's coming out. It appears Kevin Muscat has turned down the chance to join Rangers as manager. The third manager linked. Michael, you've got your ear to the ground. What's happening?
Well, you know something, Ray? Yesterday there were protests against Kevin Thelwell and Patrick Stewart. There were fans chanting against them. There were banners in the Copeland Road end. There were banners in the Sandy Jardine stand. There was fans shouting abuse at these guys in the director's box. There was booing at the end of the game. And you know what? That was a better mood and a better atmosphere and a more positive atmosphere than I've seen in recent games at Rangers, believe it or not. Because there was nothing being aimed at the manager, obviously, Stephen Smith. And there was almost a slight sense, I don't want to overplay this, but things were a little bit calmer because there wasn't the toxic figure of Russell Martin there. And I think there was a general mood amongst the fans that, well, Kevin Muscat's coming. There's still other things that we want changed at the club, other people we want out of the club, but at least the manager thing looks like it's sorted. And here we are now talking about the next development, and Kevin Muscat isn't coming. So, you know, if I really genuinely don't know where Rangers go next to try and find a name.
Do you think it's a case of like Gerrard and Muscat are meeting Thelwell, they're meeting Stewart, and that's what's turning down? And if it is, are they looking for a yes man? Well,
listen, I mean, the club is saying that is not the case, and there were insurmountable problems with getting a deal across the line with Kevin Muscat. Others people are saying, well, no, it wasn't that. It was, Muscat was unwilling to work with the setup that he would be coming into at Rangers and the people within the setup. So, you know, who you believe in that is up to yourself. But certainly the fans have made their minds up that it's individuals within the club that are problematic in the recruitment of the next head coach.
Yeah, and Ryan, be honest with us, because you've been a player a long time. Does this kind of stuff affect the dressing room? Will the players be talking about this?
Yeah, I think so. You know, you want someone in to not be a leader as such, but you know, have some kind of direction, some kind of normality, some kind of direction in terms of what you're going. There'll be players that are out of contract. There'll be players that have signed under the previous manager. There'll be that kind of worry of, you know, is a new manager going to come in and will he like me? Will he want to give me a new contract? Will he play me? So yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty, within the playing group. I also sometimes feel there's a lot of footballers love to have an excuse as to why they've not performed at the level that they want to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of players take that route. You know, well, we don't have a manager, or everyone doesn't like the manager. Why were we doing these tactics, or why are we doing that? You know, footballers are famous to point the fingers everywhere, instead of just maybe looking in the mirror and thinking, I'm actually not performing at the levels that I should be performing at. So I think there's probably a combination of all of those things. You know, players underperforming, players coming to Rangers and not understanding the pressure that is involved in that, the sort of toxic atmosphere that's surrounding sort of especially home games, which is understandable, you know, considering the position they're in. And it seems to be a bit of a vicious cycle. And I think a lot of opposing teams are sensing that as well, and getting a little bit of a lift and getting getting sort of that maybe 5-10% extra in terms of knowing that, you know, if you keep hold of the ball or create a couple of chances, that the crowd will turn. And it's been shown so far this season that the players are really struggling to, you know, sort of turn the crowd back on, and get them to sort of support them.
Yeah, it seems like both of you pointed out, it's the atmosphere there that, as a neutral, is very fun to watch. But if you're a supporter of that club, I was chatting to a Rangers fan this morning, and he was just, I don't know where we go from here. I really don't. Obviously, we'll have more on this story all through the week. The Scottish Football Podcast, available every day. See who's getting linked with a job as we go. Before we wrap up, I feel it's only right. We've got Michael and Ryan here. Let's chat about your respective clubs. Aberdeen, Michael, moved off the bottom spot with an injury time winner over St Mirren. Have they turned the corner?
They're certainly consistently showing signs, Ray. Jimmy Tulane, isn't it funny, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, the whole debate around Aberdeen was, is Tulane at the end, is he going to get sacked? And you win 2 games and it's just not discussed at all.
Is he going to be the Sweden manager with the links this week?
Yeah, I mean, it's a nuts scene that we're in here, But, I mean, listen, if their next game's away to AEK Athens, really hard. They're then at home to Hibs, again, really difficult. But what you would say is the team, I think there's good players in that Aberdeen squad, and I think they're beginning to show it. Lazetich's goal was wonderful. He's shown signs in the last 2-3 games that there's something really there. Carlson was terrific against Dundee. And it's just what we've been talking earlier with Hearts. You start to build something. Now, as I say, the hard game in Athens on Thursday night, but there are definitely green shoots there for Aberdeen because they've got good players.
Yeah, I think that AEK Athens game on Thursday is going to be absolutely fascinating. Ryan, for yourself, Hibs were dominant in a 4-0 win over Livy. In a very un-Livy-like performance. Livy don't often take a hammering, a 4-0 or whatever. What did you make of that? Cleed looked very good. That first goal I heard described as Alan Shearer-esque on Open All Mics. But Ryan, for Livy, not the best day at the office?
Yeah, I think very disappointing. All credit to Hibs for winning 4-0 and being quite comfortable in the end.
Do you mean that though?
No, not really. But I think, overall, from a Livingston point of view and from the players and the management staff, we're just more disappointed in ourselves. Like you said, it was very unlike us. I think it was very passive. We just seemed to be a little bit off it. And I think sometimes what happens is you can kind of carry 1 or 2 players or possibly even 3 or 4 players sometimes through games, but it just felt like one of those days where no one particularly played well. And Hibs kind of scored at all the right times. He scored, I think, 15 minutes into the game, which settled them down, made us a little bit nervous. Then he scored straight after half-time to go 2-0 and then score 2 kind of late ones. But, I thought Hibs were good, but I thought that we were really poor, and that's something that we're going to have to change pretty quickly.
Well, that's all we got time for. A nice happy note to end on for Ryan. Many thanks to Ryan McGowan and Michael Grant, and thank you for listening. Remember, we're here with new episodes of the Scottish Football Podcast bright and early every day, so to make sure you don't miss out, subscribe on BBC Sounds and have push notifications turned on in your phone. Another fascinating weekend of Scottish football with managers turning down jobs and Hearts going 5 points clear. The game next Sunday is going to be incredible. There's European action before that. Keep listening to the podcast and we'll keep you right up to date. Thanks for listening. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
For everything you need to know about your team this season, download the BBC Sport app. All the latest news, goal updates, stats and scores, and insight and analysis. Just select your club to get the biggest stories and best content at your fingertips. What a result. Download the BBC Sport app for everything you need to know about your team this season.